Hi friends, I'm Tammy K. Welcome back to my channel. And have you ever been confused about water control? Today we're going to talk about the number one thing I recommend for helping you with water control so that you're not getting puddles all over your paper. But we're also going to talk about something else. Sometimes we get confused about how much water to add and how much paint to get the value that we want, the lightness and the darkness. When we're doing our first basic wash, which is light, or the shadows, which is darker, midtones, all the things, it's very confusing, but it's not gonna be confusing today because we're gonna do this value scale and then we're gonna do this paint consistency scale. I even have blue on my fingers to prove it. I'm really excited to show this to you. If it's not something you've done before, it's a great exercise and it's also fun and can be pretty. But to help you understand that paint to water ratio in a way that's not scientific, that's not crazy, that's not gonna be confusing, so let's get to it. All right, friends, we are well on our way to figuring out some water control. Now, one of the biggest things that I like to do if I want to control how much water is on my brush is when I dip in and grab some water, grab some runny paint, I have a lot of water on my brush. And if I were to just paint something here, you can see it's pretty glimmery, glistening. That's not necessarily a problem. But what if I grab a bunch of water, a bunch of paint with this brush? You can see it's dripping off, right? And then I paint a circle and all of a sudden, well, that's not even a circle, but there's a hot mess, a big puddle here, and that's going to give me some hard edges. Now, if I were to do the same thing, so I grab a bunch of runny paint, a lot of water on my brush dripping off, but I simply take a paper towel and I dab it, all of a sudden, I'm going to have a lot less water on my brush. There's still a lot, but if I were to dab it a little bit harder, next time, a lot lighter paint, a lot less water happening here. And so that is one way to practice your water control. Now, another thing when we talk about water control is trying to figure out how much paint to how much water is going to give us the lightness or the darkness, the value change that we want. So we're going to start with this number 12 brush again, and I'm going to start with a very dark blue color. Is this the one I want? This is a beautiful kind of an ultramarine. And what I want to do is take a pretty concentrated amount, as concentrated as I can without it becoming too dry to paint. And I'm just going to simply take my brush, press down with the belly, and add in a nice little mark. Look at how dark that is. What I want to do is slowly, gradually lighten it because we're not adding white to our paint to lighten it. So I'm going to take my brush, dip it in water, and squeegee off the side and make another mark. All of a sudden you can see I'm gradually starting, look at how pretty that is with the paint flowing, starting to lighten up the paint. I did the same thing dipping and then sliding off the side, wiping off the side, and look at that. You're seeing this subtle value change. So dip, swipe, make your mark. Dip, swipe, make your mark. And as we're doing this, my water is getting really dark. So I'm probably not going to see a shift in the value as much. So I'm simply going to go to my other water over here, dip, swipe, and make my mark. So you do this over and over until you get to the lightest amount that you can, or maybe you kind of run out of space. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Let's do 1 or 2 more. And now you can see just adding, and I'm going to go really, kind of clean that up really well. And do one more mark. And we can keep going with fresh water and you'll get really light till it almost disappears. Actually, it will disappear once you have just water on your brush. But you can see that you can go really dark and you can go really light just by adding water. But little by little, you're able to see that value shift as when you dip in, you take off some paint, but you're also adding water at the same time, and that's lightening up your paint little by little. So now the other piece that we want to work on is figuring out what consistency do you need to paint certain things, or how can you create different consistencies. So we have a system here that is pretty well known. If you haven't heard of it, that's okay. Hopefully this makes sense for you. We start with weak tea, weak tea, coffee, milk, cream, and butter. And I'll tell you what that is. It's gonna make sense in a moment here. So first of all, we're gonna start with the lightest amount of paint that we can have, where we're still seeing it, it's still making a difference on our palette. So this is very runny, and if I move my palette, it moves around really easily, okay? So this is going to be what we consider a weak tea. This is mostly water and a little bit of paint. And you can see just how that glides on. It's very smooth and it's very light. And then I would use this for my basic wash. The coffee as well. What we're gonna do for coffee is we're just gonna add in a little bit more paint because we want to darken it up, we want to thicken it up a little bit. So I'm just taking a little dab and I'm poking that paint into it. So now you're seeing a subtle, maybe not so subtle, change in that color. Now this moves on my palette still, and it's very watery, but it's a bit darker, okay? And this is what we call our coffee. And if you feel like, no, it needs to be a little bit darker, poke in a little bit more paint, and then just go ahead and put that on your paper. So this is not a scientific process. We're not thinking about specific percentages. I just want this to feel easy for you, okay? We're getting the idea of it. If your paint is darkening up slightly, you're on the right track. All right, so now for our milk, we're gonna add in some more paint. It's gonna get a lot darker. It's still gonna move on the palette, but not as fast. If I go like this, a little bit more paint would be good probably. It's just gonna move a little bit less fast than if it were just that water there, right? Still lovely, but a lot darker. Let's see how this looks. For our milk, you can see it's a lot darker than our coffee. So our weak tea and our coffee, I tend to use that for that first basic base layer. And then for milk, I'm gonna use that when everything has dried and I want to start to add in some dimension, some texture, some shadow. I'm gonna go a little bit darker with this milk. So cream is the next one where it's so thick, it doesn't move on your palette, but it's not too thick that you can't paint it smoothly. Does that make sense? A little bit more water, a little bit more water, a little bit more of this beautiful paint. So it's pretty thick, but it's going to go on smooth. All right, so that's not moving on my palette. See, that's your little test. Let's see if it's gonna go on smooth. That's our cream. It's getting to a point where it's almost too thick to go smoothly, but still good. So again, this is gonna be just like milk is gonna be when I'm adding in those darker values. Now butter. Butter is the one where I only use it maybe for like texture. You're gonna get a really nice dry brush technique. So what I do for that is I take my brush and I dab it in here. And then, water control, I take off some of that liquid and then I paint that on. And you can see we're skipping a lot of areas because of this rough texture in the paper. It really skips around a lot, but this is so thick that you can't paint it on smoothly. Now, I don't use this too much, but like I said, sometimes you want some texture in the ground of your landscape or something like that. So that's simply it. Practice these two exercises, the value scale, and then showing right here the paint consistency. It's really fun. Try different colors. And then don't forget that once you grab your paint and you've got a dripping paintbrush, guys, dab on your paper towel and then go at it with your painting. Okay guys, so thank you for doing these exercises with me today. I really hope that they are helpful. I did not invent them. I learned them from other artists. I learned them from art materials. I use them and practice them all the time, so hopefully it sheds some light and helps you in your painting journey. Reminding you that I am on Patreon and you can click the link below. $3 and up, different tiers for exclusive content. Those are my memberships and you can check those out. I've got Skillshare classes as well, linked below. I've got some freebies also, so you can join my newsletter, you can join to get the ebook and all the fun stuff. All right, happy painting, happy mental health, and I'll see you guys soon on the next tutorial.